are watching Channel Africa Conversations.
People of Africa are going to be held back by this cabal of leaders who think that they should be there forever. And, you know, recently I heard that the president of Cameroon, who's in his 90s, wants to stand for an 8th term. How ridiculous is that? And what a laughingstock it makes us in front of the world community. It's just pathetic.
Hello and welcome to Channel Africa Conversations. I'm your host, Peter Ndoro. Today we bring you an in-depth conversation with a man whose life has been woven into the fabric of Botswana's national identity. Born into one of Southern Africa's most iconic political families, the son of Sir Seretse Khama and Lady Ruth Khama, Ian Khama has lived at the intersection of tradition, power and service. He trained at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, rose to lead the Botswana Defence Force and later served as Vice President and President of Botswana, helping to shape the nation's policies on governance, conservation and integrity in public service. Yet in the years after his presidency, Seretse Ian Khama's name has also become associated with political turmoil, allegations of persecution and self-imposed exile. Now back in Botswana, not just as a former head of state, but as Kgosigolo of the Bangwato, he finds himself navigating both a personal and political legacy in a changing nation. In this conversation, it's about the man, the mission, the moment that we find ourselves in as a continent, and we speak about leadership, justice, exile, Africa's direction, and the future that he still hopes to shape. Mr. President, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Channel Africa Conversations.
You're very welcome.
Let's begin perhaps with the family that you were born into, the son of Botswana's first and founding president and the son of a British woman, and their love story which defied colonial rule. What was it like growing up in such a legacy?
You know, it was something that one obviously would have been aware of very regularly because you could not escape the fact that what you have just described was very topical at the time. I myself was born in England because my parents had been forced into exile because they had chosen to marry each other, one a black man, the other a white woman. And that was not acceptable to the South African government at the time. And then they persuaded the British government to remove them from Botswana because they did not want a mixed marriage on the borders of South Africa because they thought it would set a bad example to people in that country. And because the British government relied on South Africa for certain minerals, they agreed with that proposal. And my parents, like I said, were forced out of Botswana. And I lived the first 3 years of my life in the UK. And then coming back after that time, came back to a country, this was before independence, and Botswana was a very, very poor country, one of the poorest in the world. And my father then set about with others in the country, other citizens, to obtain independence for our country so that we could go it alone.
So much has been written about your father, understandably, and some about your mother. I'm curious about what is not written, what is not known about them that perhaps shaped a lot of who you became as a man.
Well, I think, you know, as a child growing up under them, I had always in the back of my mind the sense of duty. Because even though my father, who, you know, was very committed to the country and to get it onto the path of independence, and then after independence, trying to grow the economy to be able to improve the welfare of its citizens. And my mother immersed herself in charitable organizations to help people because there were a lot of people living in poverty at the time. one was always aware, even in your daily life, that you couldn't live just the normal life that everybody could be, because you know you had parents who had a particular calling and wanted to ensure that they were able to deliver for the best for the people in the country at the time. So for me, you know, it was a, you know, half of one, you know, half a dozen of one, six of the other, in terms of the kind of life that a child at that age would live, that you were able to do certain things that a child should do, but then you were also very much aware of your role and your responsibility with parents like that.
I wonder then, do you think that much of your life was then predetermined, given what you were born into? Or was there a subtle pull over time that led you to service?
I think it was, again, I think it was a combination of both those. Because there's no doubt that my parents had their own minds made up as to what they thought I should do, being the eldest son. My father very much wanted me to go into politics. My mother was very happy with me being in the army and to continue being in the army. I, for myself, was not very keen to want to go into politics. I was quite happy in the army as I was. So yes, they did have a lot of say in the role that I took up in my life.
Had you not been Seretse Khama's son and born into this family, what do you think you might have been?
That's a very good question, because at the time I started my working life, there was no army in Botswana. That was a deliberate decision by the government not to have an army at independence. But in my blood, there was always that love for the military. So I think one way or the other, I would have ended up in the military, and that was the closest thing to me at the time.
So you then did go to Sandhurst, rose through the ranks. What did you learn there, do you think, about discipline, leadership and service that stood you in good stead for the rest of your life?
Everything you mentioned just now, what Sandhurst imposed on you. I don't know whether to use the word to teach you, but certainly everything you did at the time with the directing staff, the people who were responsible for instruction, was all about that. The service, the discipline, the leadership was ingrained and into you. And for me, as I look back to what I did then and what I've done since then, I think I couldn't have asked for a better foundation in starting off my life in the various roles that I then took on.
Did you ever wrestle with your destiny, or once you accepted your path, it became easy just to deal with it, knowing that this is who you are and what you must do?
Well, that's how I am. Is that whether it's something that I want to do or and not particularly willing to do it, but once I'm in it, I set my mind to doing the best I can and make the best out of the situation and deliver it. There's no point crying over spilt milk. That's how I found after I left the military and entered politics. That was the situation I found myself in. And I just applied myself as best I could during the years that I was in government.
So then you took office in 2008. At the time, Botswana was enjoying a reputation for stability and clean governance. What was your vision at the time, now that you are in the highest office, and also, I guess, on your shoulder was still your father's legacy?
Well, I set myself a target of being guided by what I call the 5 Ds. The 5 Ds being democracy, development, dignity, discipline, and delivery. And each one of those ones was what I applied to myself as to what I should, like I said, be my guide in how I go about my role as president of the country at the time. And when we talk about the issues of democracy, democracy continues to evolve. It's not finite. So all on an ongoing basis, you have to constantly be trying to improve the democracy credentials and principles and values that come with it. So that's why it was there, one of my Ds. Development was to do with both infrastructural development and the development of our people in terms of education, health, and what have you. So that was how we went about it. Discipline and dignity. We had a situation where we had to ensure that we looked after people who were disadvantaged. And that is something that guided me as well. A lot of the charitable work that was done previously by myself, my mother, my father, and so on like that, was also a cornerstone of what I wanted my administration to do, was to lift people up out of poverty who were in poverty and improve their lot.
So what do you then, looking back, consider your biggest accomplishment in office? And also maybe what still keeps you up at night, even now, that you think, I wish I could have done that?
You know, that's a question I always try to avoid answering, because I always feel best for others to judge what they thought of my legacy. But the one thing that does stand out for me was that at the time when I came into office, we were hit by that economic world downturn, you would remember. And that was a huge challenge for us at the time, but we overcame it. So for me, the way we overcame it, the policies and programs we put in place in order to come out of that, I think is something that I look back with and with some satisfaction that we were able to achieve it and set the country back on the path of development and growth that had been going before that. And then also, I think the programs that I've just mentioned that looked at getting people out of poverty, particularly targeting the poor and the destitute, the programs we put in place, I think, were others. Also, the youth development programs, the women's empowerment programs, those were the type of things that remain entrenched in my mind as to what I would say I'm satisfied that we'd achieved quite a lot during that period.
Is there anything that you, even to this day, especially when you consider the future of the country after you left, that you wish you could have done or put in place before you came out of office?
To be quite honest, no. I think, you know, when you have a developing country, I remember the people in our Ministry of Finance always used to talk about prioritizing what we needed because the budget was limited. But when you're developing, everything becomes a priority because whether it's the road infrastructure, provision of water, electricity, education, health, the whole lot of it has to be done. You can't really leave any one of them behind. So I think, you know, when you look at the whole spectrum of what we tried to achieve, I think we were able to touch on almost everything in my mind. And everything was kind of brought up together. So looking back now, I don't think there's something that I could say, you know, was left behind. You could say, what decision did I take that I may have regretted? That's a different question, and I have an answer for that. But generally, when it comes to programs and projects, I think we touched on everything.
All right. Well, let's deal with the regrets then, maybe, the decisions that perhaps that you do look back and say, maybe I shouldn't have done that.
As I was saying it, I was regretting that I'd mentioned it because I knew it would then come. But I think you know exactly what I would have said anyway when it comes to regrets, which is all about the person who succeeded me.
Mr. President, let's talk about that decision then, because you pretty much anointed the president that followed you. Was it a moment of a poor judgment of character in choosing him, or did he take you by surprise? What went wrong?
Well, everything. I mean, now, of course, you could say it was a very poor choice on my part. But certainly at the time, and when I look back to it, even today, I don't mind admitting it, that at the time, I didn't have any regrets about the person I chose because he was very supportive, very loyal, and in everything that we did together. And that's why I chose him. But then when you talk about chalk and cheese, the person he was then and the person he became, and it's not just me saying it, everybody in the country never saw it coming, that somebody could change his spots like he did and became the kind of person that he did, something that we never ever expected our country would ever have to go through.
You then left the Botswana Democratic Party, the party that your father co-founded. This must have been a really difficult moment in your life. What ultimately led you to walk away and say, I have to leave this behind?
Well, you're very right. It was a very difficult and painful decision because, yes, the party that my father formed, the party I joined, the party that I went on to lead as well for 10 years. And that soon after that, I left it. It was because he had totally undermined the values and the principles that the party stood for. Everything in its constitution was violated, including even in the Botswana constitution. So I just felt that this, I'm not going to just follow a name. I follow the values, how a party performs. And it was no longer performing under his leadership and delivering what it was supposed to for the benefit of the people of Botswana. Everything was turned around and it was all inward looking, it was all self-interest, it was all about himself. And I just wasn't going to be part of it. And I just said, as painful as it is, even though this was my father's party, I no longer recognize it as my father's party, and therefore I don't feel any obligation to continue to be part of it.
He's now gone, and it can be that the party may find its inner voice, its inner being once again. Could you find yourself going back home eventually to that party?
Oh, when you say going back home, you mean back to that party?
The original party, yes.
Yes, yes. Right now, with the role that I'm taking on as leading the tribal administration in my region, we are apolitical. So I do not pronounce my current political sympathies for any party or what they may be in future. And that is a period which is behind me now. And I'm just focused on what it is that I'm doing now.
You then went into exile. Your brothers are still outside the country. Is it safe for them to come back, or is it still unsafe in a view?
Actually, my brothers have been coming back. They've come back recently. So they are back in the country. Yes, I did go into exile because of the safety issues and all these trumped up charges that had come up against me and my brothers. But I would not say that I feel totally safe in the situation I was before I left the country, because some of the people who were perpetuating the persecution against us still continue to serve in the current government. And for as long as they're there, and I know that if they could get their way, they would want to continue the harassment and intimidation that they did before. So yeah, one cannot say, you go to bed with one eye open.
So President Duma Boko was elected in the last election. For a lot of us, particularly outside the country looking in, seeing a long-time ruling party ousted in the way that it was at a ballot box was quite a thing. Your impressions about how Botswana voted?
Well, I think you're quite right. The situation was that in 2019, they actually rigged the elections, the ruling party, to stay in. And they were attempting to do it at this time. And when I left South Africa to come back to Botswana, it was about 5-6 weeks before the election. I was determined to come back because the country could not afford another 5 years as what it had experienced under him and the ruling party then. So I think people around the country were committed. You could see the writing was in the wall that the ruling party then was going to be thrown out. And I can tell you that a good number of the ruling party then voted for the current government because we don't have presidential elections in Botswana. Whichever party obtains the most votes in most seats in parliament, they obtain a majority in parliament, its leader then becomes president. So because we don't have presidential elections and because a lot of the people, including in his party, wanted him gone, the only way they could get rid of him was to sacrifice the party in order and vote for the opposition at the time and then work on rebuilding the party after the election. So that's what happened. And because many of them have told me in the ruling party that that's how they voted against their own party in order to get rid of Masisi.
So you've said that there are still some elements, even in the current government, that are from the old school of Masisi. You have Duma Boko who's come in, but it is a coalition. So it's not as if he can do whatever he wants to do on his own. What do you see as the state of democracy now in Botswana? Is this a new leaf, one that's moving forward, but with caution, perhaps?
Well, let me just clarify the issue. Those people I said who are still in the government, they are not in the political executive. That's totally new. What I mean is that there are these elements which are still in the security services,
right,
who are still there. So, and I think over time they are going to be dealt with. They're going to be held to account for what they did. And to answer your question, I think, you know, they are facing headwinds. The first headwind that they are facing is the fact that they inherited a mess. They were left with depleted revenues, which is something that is very serious. And they've measures which have been taken place. We've seen recently the currency has been devalued because of some of these economic challenges. Then they're also facing a situation where you know how much diamonds has contributed to our development in the country, that we have a depleted diamond market. So that is another thing. Those revenues that we used to enjoy are not like they used to be anymore. And then of course, like yourselves and like everybody else in the rest of the world, we've got this monster who's imposing tariffs on everybody all over. So we will see what happens, like everyone else, on the 1st of August as to what we are going to do and how it will affect us. And it's just going to, you know, make it even more painful than what we are going through at the moment. So, and of course, being a new government, and most of them have never been in government before, that in itself also will present challenges in being able to find their feet whilst facing these strong economic headwinds. So, you know, it'll take a bit of time for them to be able to sort themselves, but I'm confident that they will come through it.
Do you think that Botswana now has gotten over a hurdle, because it had become quite polarized given the politics that was playing out? But with the size of the victory, do you get a sense that a country is coming back together again?
People are breathing. People are able to breathe again. It's it's like you were prevented from breathing. And as soon as that result came out on that day after the elections, you could just feel the huge sigh of relief in everybody that we are now back to what we used to be. We are now people again. We can now go about our lives without looking over our shoulders everywhere we go. We can talk freely and so on. So it was just a complete change, and it literally happened overnight.
So a lot of people, particularly in Southern Africa, looked to the Botswana results, and they, as you said, there was this breath, this exhale that came with it. And there were hopes in other countries in the region that they could also experience that. An election, and I know that in the past, particularly in your time as president, you were not afraid to speak your mind about the state of democracy in neighboring countries like Zimbabwe. What are your thoughts about the state of democracy? Let's start with Southern Africa and maybe the continent at large, especially given some of the things that we're seeing playing out. Seeing SADC saying this election wasn't free and fair, and people protesting in the streets of Maputo. What are your thoughts about what you're seeing in the region and across the continent?
I have no hesitation in telling you that democracy is in decline in our region. And it's very sad, because at one point, and even if you looked at the principles of SADC and the protocols that were signed, they were all geared towards what we would hope was going to be a region which would be making tremendous advancements. But the problem with democracy, and how some see it as leaders in our region and on the continent, is that they will give the impression they're embracing democracy. And they'll only do so for as long as incumbency is not threatened. As soon as maybe they may lose their jobs to an opponent, then you'll just see all the crackdown happening. And we are seeing that, like you mentioned, Mozambique. We have seen it in Zimbabwe. We are seeing it now in Tanzania. And I never expected that what's going on in Tanzania could ever happen in that country. But now, because they're heading towards election, you're seeing that, you see what's going on. And it's extremely sad that people think that they are God's gift to their countries when they become leaders, when in fact they are not. There are countries with millions of people as part of the population. And for anyone to think they are the only ones who can be heads of state or presidents is just totally inappropriate and ridiculous. And as long as it's going to be like that, we are just going to be held, the people of Africa are going to be held back by this cabal of leaders who think that they should be there forever. And, recently I heard that the president of Cameroon, who's in his 90s, wants to stand for an 8th term. How ridiculous is that? And what a laughingstock it makes us in front of the world community. It's just pathetic. But it's not only Africa. I mean, it seems to be a trend. The declining democracy is everywhere. It's in Russia, it's in Israel, where you've got those two leaders in particular who care nothing about humanity, care nothing about life, and they enjoy killing people. And I have no hesitation in saying that people like Putin and Netanyahu enjoy killing people, and that's what we have to witness on our television screens every day. And the sad thing about it, especially in Gaza, is that because of the ethnicity of the Palestinians and their race, no one is coming to their aid, and how the world can just sit back and see what's going on there. I think it's one of the worst atrocities that is playing out before our eyes, even worse than the Holocaust in the Second World War.
You sat with your peers in the African Union, and help us understand as citizens how difficult it is, even though you're sitting with your peers, to sit with someone who is a dictator, who's oppressing his own people, and should not be allowed to have a seat in and amongst you. How were you able to navigate this?
Well, The one where I navigated it was I didn't attend meetings of the African Union. I once went there when I was vice president, representing the president who was not able to take on that particular trip. And at that particular meeting, one of the leaders there was Gaddafi from Libya. And, you know, when I listened to him speak, when I saw the circus that took place around him, I just thought to myself, you know, what a waste of time that we've come to. And, you know, you have to sit for a long time listening to this one man, you know, talking endlessly, like he did once, I think, at the United Nations as well, General Assembly meeting. And it was just on that particular occasion, it was just a talk shop. Nothing was achieved. And that remained with me. And I just thought to myself, no, when you have to travel anywhere as a head of state, you know, travel to summits or occasions which you think your country will get a benefit from. Otherwise, delegate it to your deputy or to your ministers, who anyway travel with smaller delegations. It's much cheaper anyway when you do it that way. And that's why you have them there. You know, you don't have to go and attend every single summit and every single meeting or every that's taking place. So the AU, I'm afraid, maybe criticized for saying so, but, you know, I just didn't find that at the time it was really contributing much to the development of the continent.
And today, is it still not fit for purpose in your view?
You know, if you just take, for example, what's going on with the tariffs, Donald Trump's tariffs. For me, this would have been a wake-up call if I'd been in office now, to say to our people that as Africa, as countries, we should look at diversifying to the extent that we can, you know, our products and who we do business with. As a continent, we need to really step up and just not talk about integrating our economies. We must do it. And with what is happening, and we've been lulled into a false sense of security with previous American administrations, where you had governments, you know, administrations who felt that they should try to pick up and help the economies of other countries. This man, on the other hand, doesn't care anything about any other country other than himself and his own country. And this is a wake-up call for us to do something about it. But I haven't heard what the AU is going to do or what direction it's taking to try to steer the continent so that we can have some sense of economic security going forward. And look at the conflicts which are raging on our continent right now and are never ending. You know, even in our own region, in the DRC, in the north of Mozambique, you know, what's going on in Somalia, what's going on in Sudan and so on. The coups, the military coups that have been taking place. I think there are more conflicts and there continue to be more conflicts on our continent than any other continent. So I think that's the reality, you know, that it's not fit for purpose. They're just not achieving. And like I said, democracy continues to be in decline. Poverty and inequality is growing. Unemployment is growing. We're just not in a good space now, and it's likely to get worse.
Last question in this kind of region is, you've mentioned these coups, and some of them appear to be popular. Traore, Burkina Faso, and then Mali, Niger. Are you concerned about the rise of these coups? Because it is setting a precedent, it does seem. And we're seeing in some of those countries an extension of military rule. They say that we will have elections within a certain period of time, and then before you know what's happening, they extend that time. Are you worried when you see this?
First of all, let's make it very clear. The role of a soldier is not to be the government. The military everywhere in the world have a particular role, and that's what they should stick to. But yes, on our continent, we have seen these coups which have been brought about by the civilian government or the civilian administrators themselves, doing things which are unconstitutional, being driven by corruption and self-interest, wanting to entrench themselves in their positions forever. And the only way, because they manipulate the elections so that they are never removed from office, then you say, I'm not surprised, quite honestly, that the military would step in certain circumstances. Not surprising at all. But what is unfortunate is that these military governments, when they come in, these military regimes, when they come into government, are quickly criticized by the regional bodies and by the AU. And in some cases, they get suspended from those entities. But then the same organizations, regional organizations and the AU, will say nothing when they see a president violating his own constitution, being dictatorial, being corrupt, which they know can lead to maybe a military coup coming about. So they're quick to criticize the soldiers when they take over power, but they're silent when leaders are bringing about a situation that will result in a military coup. That is the most unfortunate thing about it. So yes, the more you will see poor governance on our continent, then yes, expect more military coups.
Let's look at other areas of your life now. One of the things I know that you've championed for a long time is environmental conservation. And at one point, I think you banned elephant hunting. How important is conservation to you even now, particularly in a country like Botswana?
It is very important because, you know, when you look at the world we live in today, and you know, when you talk about the environment, you're always hearing about climate change. And we've been having these climate conferences. It's because we live on this planet, and it's the only one we have, and we have to take care of it. And the degradation of the environment and all its forms, all nature's creatures and the people, if they are not taken care of, it will be to our detriment. So yes, I'm still very much involved and keep a very close eye on what's going on, not only in our country, but in the rest of the world, as it applies to conservation and our environment.
I wish we had more time, so much to ask you, but you do have a new role now. You carry the title of Kgosigolo of the Bangwato, a traditional leader. Tell us about this new role, what it means for you personally and for your people.
Well, actually, I was installed as the paramount chief, Kgosigolo, you know, in 1979. But because I was in government, in the military, and you know, then later on in politics, I had someone standing in for me as a tribal authority until I was ready to take up the role. Now that I've left politics, I have now taken up the role that I was installed to do back then. So yes, I spend my time between the capital and here where I am now, running the tribal administration, and I've introduced a number of programs and so on to try to uplift the members of the tribe.
And at this point in your life, perhaps as a final question, what is your big mission that you still have now with the coming years of your life?
Well, everything we've been talking about, you know, anything that I can do while I still have a breath of life in me to try and do what really drives me is to try to uplift the disadvantaged and the needy in our society. Charitable work will always be something very close to me. And I'm patron of two foundations that we do that kind of work. So charitable work is very much in the forefront of that. We've talked about conservation, that as well, and to make any contribution I can. And I am vocal. I belong to a grouping which is, promoting democracy on the continent. Anything that I can do to ensure and entrench democracy in this country, we don't go back to what we had in the last 5 years. And for the rest of the continent, I'll always be vocal in that regard, because where people, expect more, people deserve more, and we must try to ensure that we're in office or we're out of office to make a contribution to ensure that people get what they deserve.
Mr. President, Kholo, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much indeed for honoring us with this conversation right here on Channel Africa Conversations.
It's been a pleasure for me. Thank you very much.
And that's the former president of Botswana, Seretse Khama, speaking to us about a lifetime of work and still so much to do in his changing roles and his hopes for our continent and his concern and worries about the state of democracy. A conversation that I think and I hope that you enjoyed as much as I did. Before we go, a reminder that we'd love to hear from you. On your screen, you're probably seeing now our email details and also social media handles where you can share your thoughts with us, perhaps on what you've just seen and heard. And also we'd like to hear from you. Who else would you like us to talk to? What kind of conversations do you think we should be having right here so that we can serve you in a better way? Until the next time, from me and the team, take care. Goodbye.